Namaskar, my name is Soham. Welcome to Opinionated. Today is another gloomy day in Seattle, and the topic for discussion today is Western meddling in Indian elections. Now, in the last 15, 20 days, a trend that I'm increasingly seeing in all the Western establishment liberal press is significant bashing of Narendra Modi, significant bashing of the Bharatiya Janata Party and India in general. Now, by and large, the press, in the Western countries, mostly don't cover India at all, right? Nothing about all the goodness that we are seeing in India in terms of infrastructure development, in terms of growth, in terms of poverty alleviation. We see nothing of that, right, in the Western press. So the coverage is almost non-existent. But suddenly, just before the election, we see a plethora of coverage. Like every single establishment press had started covering India. And every single news article is anti-India, right? Thinks about, hey, India is anti-democratic, it's, autocratic, it's dictatorial, it's anti-minority, that. And I'll show you some examples. Like, look at these. I'll be sharing my screen here. Now, look at these examples. So, New York Times, the favorite, of the establishment, Modi's Temple of Lies. It talks about how Modi, destroyed the temple and then destroyed the mosque and then created a temple and now is trying to extract, votes in the name of the temple, right? Similarly, if you see CNN, another establishment favorite, they're talking about how Modi's Muslim remarks spark hate speech accusations as India's mammoth election deepens divides, which is again very, very anti-Modi and anti-India, right? Similarly, Time magazine has another article that says, hey, Modi's growth is not inclusive and the economy is really not doing as good as everybody seems to be claiming for. And similarly, I'll share Wall Street Journal. If you see Wall Street Journal, it talks about, very similar things. India's Modi marks triumph for Hindu nationalism by opening temple where mosque was, right? So the question is, the Western press, which is by and large don't cover India at all, what prompts them to put out so much anti-India, anti-Modi propaganda just before elections? Now, one could say that, look, they are trying to, meddle in the elections and trying to influence the mind of the populace in India, right? Influence the outcome of the election. But I don't really buy this, right? And the reason I don't buy this is because the people in India, by and large, won't read New York Times or will not really read Washington Post or any of those, establishment media in the United States. And this is just not a United States phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that I see in BBC in the UK, Guardian in the UK, France 24 in France. All the English-speaking liberal press seems to be going after Modi. The other, reason could be, and some would say, well, they are really concerned about the state of minorities in India. Maybe Modi is truly anti-Islamic, and maybe all the Muslims are getting suppressed in India and they don't have a voice, and maybe they don't, they are not part of the growth story, and it's their right to help them out, right? But we all know that this is not true. And I'll show you examples of this. Look at this. So the same establishment media, when they cover the Israel-Gaza conflict, now not trying to rat hole into that conflict, but we all know that there was a big terrorist attack in Israel. by Hamas, and Israel rightfully had the right to go and retaliate. But there were a lot of excesses committed by Israel. Nobody can deny that. There were a lot of women and children, Muslim women and children, who died in Gaza. But the coverage of Israel in these establishment newspapers is not that critical. In fact, most of the news that I see, it's very, very neutral. The undertone is very neutral, telling, oh, now Biden is denouncing anti-Semitism, and I'll share you this other article. Have a look. Colombia president faces key vote of censure from faculty as protests continue nationwide. Very, very neutral undertone. So if they were truly concerned about Muslims, there would be, we would see similar articles like the ones we see for India, or maybe even, even strongly worded articles, because after all, in Israel, Muslim people are dying. In India, at best, Modi is, making some provocative statement. At worst, Modi is giving out dog whistles, right, to get some votes. But in India, obviously, Muslims are not dying. So what is the cause of this fake outrage? Right? It is, one can easily see that it is certainly not sympathy for Muslims. So what is it? Now, I think there could be two reasons for this. And the reason being, the first reason could be that indeed in United States, the left establishment has been traditionally anti-India. They have been Hinduphobic, and they want to utilize this opportunity to create a fake narrative about India and Indian elections, delegitimize the Indian elections, right, and delegitimize Modi. Some of the comments that we see is, oh, India is an autocracy. Some of the folks who are a little more, I would say, well-mannered, they would call it electoral autocracy, right? The other reason could be that there are other groups external who could be getting together to influence the elections, or not necessarily the elections itself, but to change the sentiment of the Western people in general. Now, obviously, we established that they cannot change the outcome of the election, but if they can change the mindset of people in the United States and in the West and turn them anti-India, this could be of significant benefit to whoever trying to do it. Now, as I said, one theory could be very well the establishment in the United States. So a part of the establishment in the United States who is doing it. The other theory that I have is that this could be PRC, and that there's a reason for this, right? And I'll give you some example as to why I think it is possible that the PRC is trying to influence it, because some of the articles that you see here, I'll put them on screen. Tripti Lahiri, who often writes about India, and often her articles are, or most of her articles are anti-India, and you can look at some of the articles below. Ria Mogul, other stalwart journalist of CNN, who often writes anti-India articles. Similarly, Siddhartha Dev, who is an author and a columnist for New York Times. All these people are residing in Hong Kong. So is it a coincidence that most of the journalists and authors and columnists who are writing about India are all based out of Hong Kong? Maybe, or is it possible? But maybe it's possible that elements of PRC is funding this. And they have a bunch of people in their payroll, either directly or indirectly, and we are these people, and we are constant a deluge of articles in the Western press. They would attempt to change the mindset of people towards India. Now, by and large, the mindset of the Western people, Western audience, is neutral, right? They know India exists, it's growing fine, but nobody bothers a lot about India. So the governments in these countries are sort of free to do business with India, right? There is no negative sentiment. But if they're able to change the perception of the people towards India into something that's significantly negative, if they are able to change the viewpoint of people to view India's growth and Modi as being non-inclusive, then perhaps they can stall India's growth story, right? If they can delegitimize the election, they can perhaps stall India's growth story. Because then people will not go to India for tourism. There will not be investments. People like Elon Musk will think twice in starting factories in India because they will think that, there are trouble brewing in India, right? It's not worth their money. So that's why I don't think we can rule out PRC because there seems to be a Hong Kong link. And of course, it could be the establishment in the United States, or it could be in a combination of both, right? Uh, the the thing that I'll say, and then I'll conclude with, is the Indian nationalists, the government, and the people who want India's growth story to be sustained should not keep quiet about it. Because keeping quiet about it will not solve this problem. There needs to be a response. There needs to be a response to ensure that for every of these articles, there's a counter, and counter with a truthful narrative. Yes, are there problems in India? Of course there are, right? Like there are problems in the United States. Today we see a bunch of people, protesting in colleges. Whether it's rightly, wrongly, we'll discuss in a separate segment. But there is attempts to shut them down, right? So there are problems in every country. India is not an outlier, but India's problems are not something that one can qualify as a dictatorship, as an autocracy, as non-inclusive. India is very much an inclusive democracy, inclusive, pluralistic democracy. And by keeping quiet, we are not doing ourselves a favor. So the only way to counter this narrative is to coming up with a bigger and stronger narrative. To counter a negative, biased voice is to come up with a louder and truthful voice. So whoever is listening, I would strongly suggest like and subscribe, come up with your own viewpoints, come up with your own articles, go to social media and voice your opinion. Namaste and have a good day.